This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome, everybody. I'm glad to see everybody's here, and most everybody's got their cams on, so I appreciate that, because what I want to do is have a discussion today. We got a structure here, and I also apologize, it's snowing here, so if you hear rattling in the background, that's snow. It's actually snow plows going by. So what I'm going to do today, and I'm going to ask Rob Schenk from Intivix to help me through this a little bit. What I've noticed actually a lot working with the STP people is that there's a range of roles. Can you guys hear me? Okay. There's a range of roles that a client account manager will play in the selling and the execution of projects. And what I've seen in many cases, what I've seen recently is, particularly a couple specific instances, is there's no real clear definition of what the client account manager's role is and what in that context. We'll kind of go through that today, if you don't mind. There we go. And make sure that what I want to go through is kind of some best practices that we've seen anyway in the sales of projects, and then in the CAM's role in the execution of projects as well. So again, I'll go through this and ask Rob to join me in this, but today is kind of like a high level discussion, but I want to kind of go through it and identify those areas where there could be some benefit of drilling down more on a topic. So that's kind of what I want everybody to hopefully pay attention and have your thinking caps on, just so we can figure out, in this specific topic, what are some ways to I just want to mute one person. What are some ways that we could kind of develop, or I could develop some material that would help you guys even more? I think I got everybody muted now, so we're cool. So if you think about it, I don't know if that's true, I think it's true. I think possibly the biggest part of your job is finding project opportunities and using those project opportunities to sell additional hardware, additional software, additional services in a sense. But I don't know if I don't know if in general it's been a really well thought out process for where and how does a CAM fit in versus how do other people fit in. And in general, what are good best practices in the sales of it and in your role of the management of it. So that's a little bit about what we wanted to talk about today. And the way I look at it, and I'll stop and ask questions at certain points. The way I look at it is you either lead the sale of projects, or you certainly partner pretty intently in the sales of projects. So is there anybody here that's not true of? Okay, I don't see any hands. So Al, raise your hand. Yeah, I can't see everybody, so if
I was flipping my mic up.
Yeah, if it is a yes, turn your mic on and say yes. I don't really participate in project sales. So we got Al. Anybody else? Okay, that was what I was hoping for. And Al, someday you will be involved in selling projects too. This won't be lost on you.
No, that wasn't a hand raise. I'm actually a big part of project sales. I was just adjusting my my mic on my
okay. Headset. Cool. Then mute yourself while you're on, and then come when you want to talk, unmute yourself if that's okay. Okay, so then my hypothesis sounds true so far. And second of all is, as a project's being executed, this is the part I haven't seen formally very much. But is there a specific role for most of you in the execution of a project, and what kind of role you play in projects that are being conducted at your clients? So is there anybody here that's not involved in at least communicating in a project or participating in project meetings or things like that? Again, if the answer is yes, unmute yourself and say yes. All right. So far, so good. I correctly diagnosed the issue. So we wanted to talk about it today was just a little bit about, in the sales of projects, what are the things you have to get right? And in the execution of a project, what is a impactful role that a client account manager can play in that process? And I think what we'll talk about in the first step is a little bit about make sure that as you discuss a project and as you kind of go through the project definition plan, that the project's set up for success and that you have covered all the bases you need to cover in a project sale. And then what I found in general, even if somebody else is leading that process, I think you're a good, at least quality control part of that process. And there are certain aspects that you can pay because you probably know the client, know the actual people at clients better than anybody, right? So there's contributions you can make there too. I think in terms of client satisfaction during projects, what you'll find is the communication is probably, I would say, the number one driver of it. So managing expectations, communicating progress against expectations, that's kind of your guys, strong suit, right? That is what you guys in general should be able to do quite well. And then, at certain critical points in the process, being able to make sure that you're prominent in that role as opposed to like a byproduct of that role. And in general, too, I think things that everybody should keep their eye on, but you can be attentive to is what we call scope creep. Is if you don't have a really clear definition up front about what's the purpose of a project and what the boundaries are basically about a project and how things can slip or how things can change and how you're going to handle the change. So there's a lot of things in there. We'll talk about addressing scope creep. And then the other thing that you are uniquely qualified to do is just integrate yourself with the project team and make sure that the project team's integrating with the right people on the client side, right? That's kind of your world that you live in too, is you kind of live in the client world and the internal firm world, and making sure those things are connected in the right way for a project to work. And if somebody's not included that needs to be included, or somebody's not being communicated to at the client that should be included in it, that's a pretty important role that you could play. And the fourth thing is, and it goes right along with scope creep, is figuring out how you're going to handle change orders throughout the project. So if something is not included in the scope and the client wants to do something slightly different or slightly more or slightly less, that's where you guys got to jump into as client account managers, because you again are skilled at having those kinds of conversations. The technical team may or may not be, right? So what we wanted to do today was this. I would look at this like, if this is a good topic for everybody and something worth drilling down in the future, just treat this as just kind of like a first level pass today. And then we can together think through, are there certain aspects of that we should go into more detail? Is there something that's not even on here that we should talk about? So this is kind of, don't think this is going to be like the God's gift to the subject matter. It's really our first shot at it, just based on what Rob and I have seen. And please think about, this and other areas that we can start to build into the curriculum for you guys, so that we can actually say, if we cover these 4 to 6 things in the first half of the year, these would be the best 4 to 6 things to cover. All cool so far? Yes. All right. Rob, are you on too?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Okay, good. So why don't we start doing this next part together as soon as I can make the slides work. Why is that not moving? There you go. So we'll talk first about the sales process in a project. And honestly, from my early background, my career was like almost 100% doing project sales and project management in an enterprise environment. And I learned certain things that are essential to doing it correctly. And what I found is the more quality you put into the sales process, the better out the project's going to turn out to be. So most of project management should actually be defined in the sales process in a way that you're going to be guaranteed that, we've talked through, we've planned, we've understood all the things we need to understand, in order that when we put a project together, you should be, honestly, gosh, you should probably be on time and on budget and make money 95 to 100% of the time. Right? If we don't do that, it means we didn't do some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. So the first thing in a project is what we would just call project definition, right? Which is what do we think the client needs to do? What is it that they think they need to do? What is the outcome they think they're going to get? And making sure that everybody knows those things in extreme clear detail. That sounds weird. That sounds like kindergarten stuff. But more often than not, the first bullet point is the most important thing we're going to talk about, right? So it might be a project that you've done 100 times, right? Or it may be a project that you've done like 5 times. But regardless, you want to go through the whole process by which we understand in all aspects why the client's doing it, what they expect to get out of it, right? The simple word for that is objectives and outcomes, right? So what we really just got to do is like, okay, why is this important? Why you invest in time and money in it? What is it that you expect to get out of it? And we should be thinking about that even if we're the ones coming to them with the project, right? A project makes complete sense to us, but unless we understand those things from their perspective, then we won't be able to manage those expectations throughout.
Yeah, I can add a little bit here.
Yeah, please.
So the way that I've kind of looked at projects has been kind of like defining it like almost like kind of one. I heard this not too long ago. Basically, the concept of fives, right? So if it's touching 5 computers or 5 people, 5 users, or it's going to take more than 5 hours of time, then maybe that starts to become, okay, that's where the kind of it's a project now kind of thing kind of comes into play. You know, we have clients that, hey, can you guys make this change for me? Kind of depends on the level of the complexity of it. We've started to look at it from a more kind of holistic, kind of long-term strategic point of view. I think, you know, Audrey kind of talked through the strategy overview that we've been using to kind of set these longer term objectives, roadmap for our clients, kind of getting them involved in the process so we can kind of define and forecast projects over time, and then kind of set the stage and having these regular conversations with the clients, talking about, hey, you know what, you know, that server is going to be out of warranty in the next, you know, whatever, Q3 2022. And we're going to go ahead and we think it's going to cost roughly about this much money to go ahead and make that change. Let's go ahead and kind of repeat it when we have our quarterly meetings with them. So now they have it in their brain. Yes, I need to start budgeting for that particular kind of thing. So it's not a surprise for them, and they're trying to kind of lay these things out, you know, in the future as much as possible. And that kind of just creates that pipeline of projects. Clients understand exactly what's going on and what the future looks like. And then there's going to be, you know, things that are more ad hoc that just kind of come up along the way that you're going to go ahead and integrate into a project proposal for them. So kind of defining, hey, what is a project, and then laying out this kind of long-term expectation budget roadmap for them so they can go ahead and plan for these things ahead of time. And then I think, you know, for, you know, let's say that we're going to go, particular project needs to be completed, you know, really kind of defining very clearly what the, you know, defined scope of that project is. In our process, we're using, you know, ConnectWise, Cell and Quozal to go ahead and create these kind of project plans. They tend to be very kind of defined scope. And there's been, you know, communications with the end user and the client to go ahead and talk about what is, you know, to Michael's point around objectives and outcomes, and being very clear about what is included, what is not included. Here's the, you know, the various pricing for that, you know, path. There's situations as well where, you know, some of these project plans can be quite complex. Maybe they're taking, you know, 4, 8, 16 hours of time as part of a discovery. And so one of the things we've been kind of running into, okay, well, you know, do you bill for that sort of stuff? We've started to go ahead and bill out, if it's going to be kind of a complex project, billing out a discovery phase, where they're paying us to go ahead and basically figure out what it is that the plan is, because it hasn't been defined yet. Almost kind of like a, you know, Michael, we talked about this the other day, about a phase 0 almost. So we're starting to build that in for more of like smaller scale projects. If we have an expectation I would say even having a conversation straight up around just budget, because oftentimes, you'll do a bunch of time to create a project plan. So-and-so client wants to have this project done. We go ahead and do the project quote for them, and then all of a sudden, hey, you know what? You don't hear anything from them. They don't approve it. It's too much money, et cetera. But having that conversation up front around just general budget, I think is also very important to kind of, is this in the realm? I'm not going to spend any time, creating this plan if it's going to be out of budget for you guys anyway from the get-go. Right?
Yeah, so we'll go through, we'll kind of unpack what Rob was just going through and put in these slots here, but those, because I think the goal here is to say, how do you sell a project correctly up front, right? And if we really understand like project definition plan, objectives and outcomes, like what it is are they trying to accomplish, why is it important, how is it going to affect them and their people, right? And then two is the other phrase you used the other day, Rob, was end user impact. Is what you want to understand is who within the organization is part of this project, both either as a participant or as a recipient, right? And understanding like how is this going to affect the people at the client, and what do we want to make sure happens as they go from kicking off the project to executing the project to closing the project, right? Who within that organization is going to be affected, and what is it we want to make sure we manage through that transition, before not doing anything, kicking it off, executing it, managing it. And then the other thing you want to understand too is their timing, like why, even if we're proposing the project, right, is how much time is it going to take, but is this what kind of timing concerns we have to be on? Are the people available? Is there some company event happening, right? You got to think through all the things that could happen from a timing dimension to make sure that their expectations are set correctly up front and we deliver on those expectations, right? And then Rob, you touched a little bit on scoping too, and it's scoping is one of the ones you could do like a whole session on scoping. But the basic thing you have to, the way I think about scoping is it's basically identifying the ground rules, right? So what are the ground rules? It's like what is the work that's included in this project and what are the works that's not included in this project, right? What people are included in the project, what people are excluded from the project, right? It's a very clear definition of all the things that could escalate a project or throw it off track, right? So that could be things like scoping can be like what kind of participation or support do you need from the client, right? What you want to do in scoping is identify all the things that you need clarification on that's going to keep the project on track, right? And what's going to happen, you can guarantee, or almost guarantee in every project, there's going to be some kind of change order, right? That they're going to want to do something that's not in scope, right? They're going to want to might add more people. They might want to have you do more work than they agreed to up front too. So another explicit thing you want to do is anticipate the things that are going to change and exclude them from the scope as much as possible. Just making sense, guys? Is this helpful? So scoping is the project definition of scoping is about half of getting the project correctly executed, right?
Yeah, and just kind of add to that too. So the scoping exercise is very important. I would say like as you start to do a couple of similar projects, this becomes just templatized, right? So yeah, and also a question of like how this gets budgeted. Is this a fixed fee? We tend to do as much fixed fee projects as we can, and then we just try and be more efficient with that time. As we start to get more familiar and kind of do these projects in a repeat manner, you get better at them over time. So I think that's also an important consideration is how things get kind of getting to a point where you can go ahead as you've done these multiple times, getting them into a template. It also speeds the time to get quotes to the clients as well. You're investing less time up front because you've already done this kind of work, and you can spit out these reports a little more, proposals more quickly as well.
And then when you get into the plan and budget part of it, again, you may not be doing this part of it, but you want to be attentive to the quality of which it's getting done or be able to ask questions from the client standpoint. So simply stated, a project plan or project management plan really is around phases, tasks, roles, and timing. So it's like what are the major steps in a project, right? Within those major steps, what are the specific work that has to get done, right? And who's going to do that from both the client side and our side? And when do those phases kind of occur? You know, that's like really basic project management, but it ties into the two things that are critical from a client satisfaction standpoint. One is a clear definition of what they get in each of those phases, right? And that's the fancy term for that is deliverable, right? So if we're doing phase one, there's a deliverable or deliverables attached to it. That's the client expectation. That's what's going to get done during that phase through those work steps by those people, right? So be really clear that clients understand the deliverables and you understand the deliverables and your client team or your project team understands deliverables. And then the other thing with project management that's fundamental is things depend on one another, right? So the successful execution of project is based on something called a critical path. That means if you do all the stuff correctly, it's almost gonna be like a straight line. We'll do phase one, we'll do phase two, we'll do phase three, we'll do phase four, right? So that means that everything goes fine and you get all the deliverables that says you're gonna hit your project on time, on budget, right? That's almost never gonna happen. So what you need to do is understand the specific dependencies, like, you know, before you to do phase two, what has to get done on phase one, right? What's absolutely critical to get done on phase one. To get phase three done, what has to happen in phase two? Whatever defines the success of that phase is what's called the critical path of the dependency, right? You guys shouldn't, it's important for us to understand that because that's how we know the project's on progress and we can manage the client's expectation that it's on target. This making sense still? Too superficial, too technical.
No,
Cool.
it's good, Michael. I want to add something if you don't mind.
Please do, Chad.
It's been, I don't know that we've ever done like introductions or whatever. So most people probably don't know me or my role or kind of what I brought to the table. But I've been in this space for, let's call it 20 years. And are we just are we just making an assumption that everybody already has project management? Because in my experience, that's something that is a pretty high maturation level with an MSP, whether they have in-house project management, whether they've taken on that operational cost to run a project management office. And so depending on whether you do or don't, I think dramatically changes this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. This is something for us, it's been kind of like an evolutionary process. We've gotten to a point, like initially, like, you know, I was doing a lot of the projects, right, when we first started out. And finally got to a point where we kind of grew to a point where we finally got, hey, we have a project team and they're doing the projects and the project management and then doing the actual kind of rollouts and upgrades, implementations, kind of in conjunction with account management, right? So we kind of have broken out these roles over time. Mm-hmm. And I think, I'm not sure, the background of most of the MSPs here is kind of like where they are along that path, to Chad's point. But I think that's, I think you got the kind of, hybrid folks that are kind of doing a little bit of project management, a little bit of service management, and, they're kind of just, doing little hybrid roles, and the things aren't kind of necessarily kind of broken out over time, right? So I think it's a important consideration as well for this.
And just for the context of this conversation, isn't to teach people project management. It's teaching you how to sell projects and the CAM's role in the execution of a project, right? So I think that's the other variability, I think, too, is that I think bigger firms like yourself, Chad, and like Rob's firm would actually, most of them would actually have a project management group. But I think the client account manager, and to correct me around, I think the client account managers are still in the role in both business reviews and in specific projects of at least trying to help sell that, or in some cases taking the primary role in selling it. So the context of this page is what do you got to know? What do you got to get right in order to be able to sell it well? Like, what do you need to understand? I forget where we're at. Oh, plan and budget, okay. And then the other thing too, the other aspect that you should be attentive to in the sales process is what are all the risks that can occur in a project? And have we adequately covered them in the scope and have enough budget to address them? So the things that can tend to go wrong in projects is that clients don't do what they're supposed to do, right? Has that ever happened to any of you that you had a good project, but a client just didn't do anything they said they were supposed to do? And again, oftentimes that could be you and the project manager dealing with. So making a clear understanding of what the client responsibilities are, again, how you're going to handle change orders and change management, how the teams need to collaborate, both from the client side and the internal side, to make sure that you have a successful result. Having contingency plans for critical risk, things that are likely, what are the things that are most likely to go wrong and how can we be prepared for that possibility? And then the other thing is just a formal escalation point, right? So in other words, like if something goes wrong, that the client contacts the right person on your side. In some cases, it's going to be you. And then you know what the escalation point is within the project team in order to make sure you get it right. Making sense so far? Good. And the last one is training. Training should be part of every project, which is making sure that at the end of the project, the client knows and understands how to get the value out of what you've just done. So let's pause there. Anybody have any good tips that we haven't covered so far on the selling of projects or challenges that you found? Anything that, sounds like, I wish we could talk more about X, Y, and Z, or you didn't cover this topic. Anything come to mind about what's crucial to selling projects?
Michael, I'll just jump in here real quick.
Please.
The project definition, all of those bullet points, scoping, in plan and budget, take out phases and critical path, but leave deliverables, and then risk management. All of that should be outlined, in my opinion, in the scope of work.
Yep.
So if you've got a good scope of work document that you can train your account managers to use, and they know how to use it effectively, it will, as a sales enablement or training tool, goes a long way.
That's a great idea. Does anybody have that? Do you got like a standard project scope of work checklist that you go through?
We do.
You do?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll cover that cover one of these meetings then.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
My hope, my assumption, what I tend to find when I talk about this topic is that project manager or CAMs haven't really been taught how to sell projects. I mean, what happens is we talk about how to do them in ABRs. We get taught how to identify opportunities that turn out to be projects. But I'd encourage you guys to, and maybe we do exactly what Chad said, is think through what is it that we need or what are the gaps we might have as our organization in order to be able to sell projects more effectively. Make sense so far? And then what I want to do then, for the second half here, is talk to, okay, let's say you sold it, right? What is the role of a client account manager in the execution of a project, right? And what I believe is true is that you guys should be a reasonably integral part of any significant project that goes on at your clients. And the reason for that is you are the experts in your clients. You understand the people in particular probably as good or better than anybody at your company. Right? So again, this is something for your owners more, but just this would help you think through, are we doing this or do I play this role in projects, right? And number one is you should be, my opinion, you should be in all significant team meetings where the progress is being discussed, the deliverables are being discussed, or the outcomes are being discussed. Because if you manage the expectations correctly up front, then that's your ability that's your time to be able to communicate to clients that, we did meet your expectations. We produced the deliverables we wanted, et cetera. If that didn't happen, you are probably as expert or more expert in the client organization than anybody else in the company too. So if there are corrective actions, you should at least be a quality control point on that to make sure that if there is a problem that we have communicated the nature of the problem, the corrective action to the right people in the right way. Right. 2 is you should be attentive to the reporting and see all the reporting that goes to clients. Again, so that you're equipped to have conversations with the clients. If they come to you and say something's off track, something's on track, you know, what's this mean? What's that mean, right? If you're not involved in the project, you're not going to know any of those answers. And they may ask the project people, but they might also ask you, right? And probably the last 3 are even the most important, actually. One is you guys, I think, are experts in client communication, right? And in a project, there's going to be critical communication standpoint. I'll ask Rob to give me an example in a second. But there's going to be specific parts of the project as well as overall project progress that you guys probably should be involved in the communication of that, right? And in particular, you know, is the client sticking to what they're supposed to do, right? And are the end users getting what they expect?
Yeah, I think for me, like that part, this communication piece is really, really important. I think there's been situations in the past where, you know, a particular, you know, project was done. Hey, we're going to do this rollout. The cutover happens at, you know, whatever, 10 p.m. on Friday night. And there wasn't this kind of feedback loop almost internally that, hey, you know, this project has now been cut over. This project, you know, task has been completed. And either end user or client is, hey, you know, did this happen? Didn't hear back. Like having that kind of proactive communication and then that closing that loop, I think is super important. And account managers are typically the best suited with their relationships with the clients, and is also internally making sure that everyone's communicating and making sure that it's timely communications at the time when the end user point of contact needs to be told about a certain outcome that's going to be happening, making sure that they're kept in the loop, and then cycling back and turning back and internally and making sure that all those internal communications are also happening, almost kind of like the gatekeeper. It seems to be a kind of a very important role to kind of keep everything on track, because they're kind of, you know, the account managers kind of touching these various areas of, you know, both external as well as internal.
And I don't mean
sets
this
that
to sound like
expectation and ensures that the project is going to be completed at a high level. Clients are happy with the end result.
I also think too, and it's not a knock on technical people or project people, but I think client account managers are more attuned to the need to communicate, right? And know who the right people are to communicate to, and in what form what form that communication can best take, right?
I agree with that 100% too. Client account managers will say things in more normal lingo that end users and point of contacts can understand, versus the tech guys that are talking about your tech stuff that they don't necessarily can't translate it very well for the audience that they're trying to communicate to.
Makes sense. So the communications, and then, you know, in an odd way, maybe your project manager may or may not be as attentive to communicating to end users as well, right? So the people that are the recipient of the work are people that you probably need to stay in pretty good contact with as well. The other thing that you guys are actually experts at is what I would call conflict management, but it's probably better called escalation, right? Is one part of your job is making sure that the expectations of the client are aligned with what people are doing, and when they get out of line, how to get them back in line, right? That's probably a big part of your job in general, but you can actually build it into the formal project management process in a way to make sure we know, like, if something goes wrong, who communicates to who and how does that flow, right? So conflict management. And the last one, it sounds kind of,
and then just one point on that conflict management. I think that's something that gets defined up front, right? In your team meetings where you're kind of setting those expectations from the get-go. Okay, if there's issues here, here's the, you know, who you should be communicating with and so forth, making sure that those communication lines are very clear.
And the last thing is you want to be really careful how projects wrap up. And you want to be able to make sure that your clients are happy, that the end users are understanding and can use whatever it is we just did for them, right? And then you just want to do an after action report about, like, what do we learn about doing projects like this for clients, for this particular client and clients in general, right? What do we need to change in our approach, right? I know we hit you with a lot there. Is there?
A couple
Is-
things I would add too here. So I think the after action kind of review is, I think, a very important step.
Mhm.
Try and do that for every project that we do internally, because you're always looking for opportunities to make things more efficient and more effective internally. So, is there some stuff that we could have changed? Hey, let's make sure that we refine our process. Next time we do it, we're going to do these things instead or in addition to, making sure that you're just refining constantly. I think the other thing too is like the communications with the end users and the point of contacts at the clients, making sure their expectations have been met, getting their feedback as to what we could have improved upon, what went well, what didn't. And then over time, these are opportunities as well for kind of business development. Hey, this could be, we did this massive project for this one client and they really liked what we did. And this turns into perhaps a video testimonial or a written testimonial or a case study. And the kind of from a marketing side and from business development side becomes opportunities to get our name out there more and kind of demonstrate, our expertise in these various areas of whatever the project was about. So looking at it from that point of view is also, I think,
it's a good point
lays
too,
the
Robert.
groundwork for the future.
Yeah, and in that same context too, what I was thinking about as you're talking too is the more ingrained you are in projects, it also makes you more credible when you start doing your business reviews too. Not that you're not credible, but it's like you can start to talk back about specific things and specific instances and how how this project worked and how the lessons learned can be applied. So I think I believe that each of your companies, and I'll talk to your owners about it, should have a clear identification about what the role of a client account manager is in a project, what value you can bring to it, right, and how you kind of align with both the client side and that you align with the internal side as well. That makes sense to people so far? So if we just thought about this, like I said, I just did this at a high level just now, and we started with the project sales part, which is the previous slide, and then the project execution on that side. Is this general topic something that would be valuable to focus on and amplify in the future? How many people say yes? I'm seeing hands raised. And what is it? And again, I'm not doing this scientifically because I can only see like half of you. Actually, maybe I'll stop sharing my screen. Give me 1 second if you don't mind. Can't find my, no, let's just keep going like this till I can get it. And so is project sales something that's, let me start there first. Is project sales something that you guys are all involved in?
Yes.
Anybody that's not involved, let's say no. Okay. And what challenges do you find currently in that, just in general? Like what are the things, I mean, we kind of gave you some of the answers, but what are the challenges that you typically find in the project sales camp?
Waiting for engineering to develop the scope.
Yep.
Who said that?
That was me.
That's Chad? Okay. Yeah. So teaming and then the scoping, right? How about everybody else? Is that a pretty common issue? What other issues come up with project sales? Like if they come up with a scope, how do you know it's correct?
Yeah, I'll chime in. I think over here, one of the challenges that we're trying to navigate around is we'll get cam ops from the projects team or the service desk team, like, like a UPS has failed is an easy one, right? That's the client needs to get a new one. But there may be opportunities like Active Directory needs a revamp or server consolidations required. And so these are opportunities, these are sales opportunities, but a lot of times customers don't want to hear that. That's a need that's not going to be perceived positively by the customer. So one of the things we're trying to figure out or get a better process for is having those high-level business discussions with our customers to find maybe a need that the customer is interested in, and then we lump these other opportunities in the back. We hide them in the back of the project. We just throw
Oh,
them
I
in.
like that, Mike. That's cool.
Folded in.
So
Yeah.
all those ones, like because the service desk team beats me up. Oh, I've got like 10 ops that if this were fixed, our support experience would be better. But you can't sell Windows activation issues. You can't sell like It's hard to sell like DHCP scope contention problems or weird technical issues, right? So my team, we're trying to figure out ways to have those high-level business conversations, get more time to talk to those customers about initiatives they want, and then we just kind of lump these in behind. That's kind of what our focus has been on this year. So if anyone is doing that well, I'd love to hear about it.
So are you saying the challenge is to elevate the conversations and put project requirements under an elevated discussion? May I understand that correctly?
Yeah, have the elevated discussion to encourage our point of contact that there's these needs that would benefit them and get them to buy in, so they're excited about executing on a project, right, or an initiative. And then we take in all these other initiatives that the team is finding, and we just roll them in the box.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
pretty
so
clever.
I think like something like implementing least privilege, right? Not very sexy. It's hard for a salesperson to go and talk
Mhm.
about why implementing least privilege is something that they need to do, but maybe they've got a server migration that's coming up. That could just be a bullet point, right? Implement least privilege on the.
Yeah, you just add that as another step in the project, exactly. Scoping the hours and all that stuff.
No, it's a good idea.
That's interesting. So you're saying, yeah, that's actually a very interesting thought. That's kind of one level up from what we're talking about here, actually. But in other words, if I hear you, like you're saying, how do you set an agenda, like a business agenda for the client? And that's not a good word. But how do you set a
Yeah.
roadmap, I guess? How do you fold in minor things under a more compelling or larger roadmap in a sense?
How do we find something sexy that the customer wants, and then we throw all those things that the customer doesn't want in the back?
That's pretty funny, actually.
No, it's interesting because I think we've been doing that. Just we get that stuff on the roadmap, and usually just subconsciously, I think, in the past we've been like, and all these other line items right here can probably get rolled in under this project over here, so that we don't have to do a separate project, account for separate project management time, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But having it be more formal is, I like that, Mike. That's cool.
That's a great idea, Mike, because I guess sometimes we fall into the trap of standardization in a sense, right? That we see all these great technical reasons for doing things we want to do. But if that's why I think the CAM's role is really important, actually, is we got to figure out, like, how does the client think about that, right? What are the things that would get them excited about following a roadmap? What are kind of big business challenges that are going on with them that we can actually surf with?
Yeah, in most of my clients, they're CFOs and business owners where this conversation is easy if your point of contact's like an IT director.
Yeah.
It's cake because they get it. But if that's not the bulk of your accounts, you have to shift that conversation more towards, like, again, that's something that we're working on. We still haven't ironed out all the kinks, but maybe in a later meeting down the line, we'll be happy to share what we come up with.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great thing for us all to work on, actually. So what are some other project sales challenges that the rest of the group is having? Anything else come besides those two that Chad mentioned and Mike mentioned?
I think sometimes getting the engineering team to come along with where the industry is going can be a little bit of a fight. They're like, guys, why aren't we Azure AD masters yet? I don't know why we're not yet Azure AD masters in 2021, but it's still like, just trying to get a, like a quote for Azure servers is a fight, and then why aren't we using Azure AD? And, I have peers, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are happily using Azure AD without on-prem servers now, but we're not yet. So sometimes getting that kind of pull along is a bit of a challenge too. I say, yeah, this is where the industry is going. We got to move. I think mostly at our company, we're ahead of the game, but there seem to be a couple of the little more technical things where we need a lot of engineering feedback on how this works. That's the part that seems to be hardest to develop.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with Russell.
Oh, I was going to say too is I guess the other thing too is I guess that's why your role is really crucial too, because I don't mean this to sound the wrong way, but I don't know if all engineers or techs really think about the client all that much, right? Or don't think from the client's perspective, right?
In my experience too, I think CAMs have a 10,000-foot view, have
Yeah.
this big picture view that most engineers don't.
Yeah.
They tend to be very narrowly focused on this task or this problem without pulling back. And so I think sometimes we're able to see things because most of us are more generalists, you know.
Yeah.
Some of us came from engineering back, most of us we touch everything.
I think they're also more client-centric, right?
Mhm.
In a sense, right? So you can see the world from the same perspective that the client does. Right.
But how do we get our engineer? How do we sell to our engineers then to come
I was
along?
gonna say, that's a
Maybe
question. I
that's
hadn't
the
thought about that
question.
actually, to be honest
Yeah.
with you.
Because that's the sales job, I guess. Then.
Just so I understand too, when you say, I think it was you brought it up, Chad, is you're saying that it's the cycle time of getting quotes from your engineering team, or what's from your perspective, what's the issue with the engineering team?
Just based on the complexity, you know, it's just the time to turn around. It's it's always going to be a roadblock, just depending on what it is that you're doing.
Mhm.
You know, so you can set all the right expectations and all that stuff, but waiting for that stuff is just something that we don't have any control over.
How many people, I don't see them on here actually. How many people here have formal pre-sales engineers? I thought, yeah, 1, 2, 3. Yeah,
Just started with one.
I was going to say. And would it be the pre-sales engineer that would get involved in this kind of stuff as opposed to the project manager? In other words, could you break away the sales part of projects, definition, plan, and all that, or does it always have to go to the most technical person?
I think it depends on the topic a bit, but
Yeah.
I think they can lay the groundwork for certain things, do some kind of proof of concepts to make sure that what we're trying to propose is achievable. So I think they're kind of probably pre-sales engineers suited for that type of thing. So I think most items would probably fall under that umbrella successfully.
We've actually kind of, and Mike knows this, we've actually split ours out into a couple different people doing different types of quotes for us. And I think that's helped tremendously. It isn't all on one person and they're not getting stuck on the big complex ones. So if we're doing a mail migration, well, that's going to Barry and that's all basically templated and he whips it out in a day. Where the more complex on servers right now, they're going to me, but we're working on that. And I may be backed up, but at least I'm not holding those other types of projects back. And that's been useful. So see if you can split it out, see how much you can template out too. And so we've got, good formulas for a lot of the cookie cutter projects. Like, my own servers, we have not cookie cuttered yet.
So now I can see most of you actually is how many cases does the client account manager have a formal role in a project at your company? So there's something specific that you're aligned with this, you're involved with this, with the project team, you're at meetings and all that stuff. How many people is that true of? That's better than I thought actually. That's good. And do you have, is that like a formal kind of job description type level thing? So you know exactly in all projects what you're supposed to do, what and when and all that? I didn't think so, yeah. Does anybody have that? A definition of how a client account manager should be involved in a project. Okay, this is good. This is good raw material for me.
No,
Okay.
we have a really good project manager now that keeps most of that technical noise away from us. So we're, but we do what's called a sales handoff. So any quote that one of my CAMs, closes for a customer, on the approval, we have what's called a sales handoff, where that's our opportunity to talk to the assigned project engineer and give them the nuances of that project. What's different about this individual project? So we don't have to scope all that, put all that in the scope of work.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
And then does your client account managers stay connected to the project so they know what's getting delivered?
Not anymore.
Yeah.
Only if there's an escalation or it's big. Otherwise, we're out.
Interesting.
With us, Michael, we have our account managers take part in the kickoff, initial kickoff, and the closing meetings. and then they are the escalation point for the client because they're the ones that can handle those conversations. But for the most part, that has to go like over the project manager's head and needs somebody to come in and, you know, regulate or whatever. That they get involved that way. But from a formal, it's not with us. It's not any more complicated than opening and closing.
Makes sense.
Like,
Yeah.
can I see cans too? Like in how many cases is the CAM the primary, how would I say this? In how many cases is the CAM primarily responsible for selling projects? Raise your hand. Interesting. And besides Chad and Mike, how many people have a formal, I asked this, but I just want to see the hands, outside of Chad and Mike, how many people have a formal policy about how CAMs are involved in projects? How many people are you identified as the escalation point in a project? Deanna and not Russell. That's interesting.
Well, I think I like Deanna's answer because formally identified, no. In actuality, in practice, what happens, Deanna's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think my situation's different because I'm part-time. So, you know, Russell's the really technical one. So when there's something that's a problem that I can offload it from him, you know, whether it's billing or something's getting stuck or not moving or whatever, I'm, you know, another set of hands.
But there are a lot of times with projects where somebody, you know, does call you or I what's happening with this product and we have no idea, but they call us first.
No, that's because they don't want to pay for the hours.
Well, they've already paid for the product. But yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, I had a call just today. I mean, we had a project and it went over the hours. The customer got their bill and there's a thing. I mean, if we go over our hours, that's a conversation that we should have had with the customer at the end of the project instead of them being surprised at the end.
Right.
So,
I think you should have at the beginning of the project.
well, yeah, I mean, the project
kind
went very well.
hand in hand. Yeah.
The project went very well, and I was just going to mention we use QuoteWorks in that proposal. You're pretty much saying, hey, this is why we're proposing this. So it's kind of like the objective. It's the scope for our customer's responsibility. It's very clear, which is great for me since I'm not real technical. But when that project went over because of some issues, it's not the customer's fault. I mean, but it has to have a disclosure there that says we may go over our hours and we're going to have to bill you for it. So, and that's what happened with this customer. But we should have told her in advance before she got.
Well, and to your point, I think we're doing an intro call. We're doing a handoff call like Mike's team does. I don't think we're not very good at doing a closing call.
True.
To sort of wrap things up and then talk with the client.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I don't remember who mentioned that, but the call really puts it to closure. So
it's going on the list.
This is cool. So one quick thing before we close here is, Marty, are you there? Marty's here, right? So Marty, you were looking for some training or some reading on two particular topics. I thought we could just ask this group to see if they have any suggestions for you as well. So what were the two areas you were looking for, just some grounding or some training in?
Yeah, just I feel like I've got a good handle on account management from a sales and management standpoint. I sometimes feel like I don't have enough technical knowledge, and it makes me just a little bit more hesitant in some conversations.
And you mentioned two particular areas you were looking for stuff. One was just basically what I would call architecture.
Well, just network configuration and how that all falls together. Cloud versus a local environment, pluses and minuses thereof.
Okay, and then what's the other one? Was something just a basic grounding and security? Was that the other one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if anybody has any suggestions of some kind of reading or training or things that you benefited you in the past in those areas, just email it to me and I'll forward it to Marty.
I've got this one. Has anybody read this one yet?
Networking for Dummies, I was going to suggest that one actually.
Marty, I'll bring this into work. I haven't read it yet myself.
That's
I
good. I mean,
think so.
the fancy word for that is architecture, but you just need to know the basics, you know, components of a network, what the variations are, and it's actually not that complicated, honestly.
Yeah, the missing manual books by O'Reilly are really good too. They're good to recommend to clients. You know, very straightforward, easy to follow. A lot of good information in them too. But they're even good if a client's like, hey, I need somebody to explain Windows 10 to me. You can go that level too.
What's it called, Russell?
The Missing Manual is a
Missing
series.
Manual.
They're published by O'Reilly. I think I can post a link here.
Yeah, post it and Marty can pull it up.
It's good though. They're written by like journalists and stuff. They're not written by tech people. They're written by people who are general writers who write about tech. The editor is the David Pogue, the tech editor for the New York Times.
Well, this is good. I mean, what I'd like us to do, because a lot of the things I know in depth what we need is on the sales side. So what I want to make sure is those we're actually in this group, and as we add to this group, that we're thinking about what are the pockets of competency we need to develop together, right? And whether it's me or whether I get a subject matter expert like Rob or somebody else, but I want you guys to, I would ask you guys to think about what are the things we could be covering as a curriculum for ourselves over the year that would be the most impactful, the most helpful, the things where we can learn the most from one another. And like I said, first of all, we've spent a lot on like business reviews first, just to make sure you had those down. But I think if we can think about this together, and I'll send out some thoughts about this, is what are things we could be covering together? What are specific skills or specific competencies that would be helpful across the board? And we can start putting together a plan for the whole year. And in particular, in this subject matter, I'll reach out to you guys too. If there's things within the subject matter we covered today that it should be a broader discussion or a deeper discussion, let me know about that as well. I just think a CAM is in a weird, it's actually funny because I kind of came out of the consulting arena. And so the people that were like the project managers were also the CAMs and were also the salespeople. It was all kind of one big thing. And what's unusual about MSPs is that those roles are kind of deaggregated. And I just want to make sure, like, how can we, given those roles, what can we do to help each other get as good as we want to be in each of those functions? Anybody have anything else? I always try to start on time and end on time, so it's right at 4 o'clock my time and some variation of that in your time. So again, I'll reach out to you guys, but thanks for investing your time today. Thank you, Rob, for helping me out today. And with that, with no further ado, I will end the meeting and let you get on with your lives.
Thanks, Rob.
And thanks for that link, Audrey. Those look good.
All.
Yep. Thank you, Audrey and Mike.
Thank you.
By the way, does anybody run Fortinet equipment internally or clients? They just released a patch like some of the SonicWall, SSL VPN, about Fortinet's turn, so they might be. Run that.
Okay, good to know.
If you run that, go check it out.
We had 3 folks hit by the SonicWall thing. It was only 3, but of course they were the biggest ones.
Of course.
Of course.
So it's like that.
That's how it works.
Yeah. All right, guys.
Well noted.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Thank you all.
Good to see you, Michael.
Good seeing you guys.
Mike.
Was it a good topic, Russell?
I'm sorry I wasn't able. I'm going to have to get the recording. So
Okay.
I don't know if you saw I wasn't able to hop on till about 4:30 or so.
I know it was the last half.
Yeah, but it was so funny because what I was doing was
project management.
right, and interviewing with a client that was hit by the SonicWall thing, and we kind of, our engineers had, you'll love this, Sonia, too, because our engineers hadn't done anything wrong, but they also hadn't held the client's hand for that last part. So he'd said, you know, here's what happened. We found this, we shut it down, we locked it up. We recommend, you know, we would strongly recommend you bring in a forensic, you know, team to investigate a potential breach. We like these guys. And that was the email. And I was sitting there like, this is a potential breach. This is a big client of ours. They're fully managed. Like, no, we're supposed to be like, hey, we've got to bring these guys in. Here are 3 people that we like working with. I've set up the meetings. I mean, it's like they're freaked out right now. You gotta hold their hand, and so had this call, like realized what was going on. No problem. Let me get these meetings set up, which they are now. Immediately get an email back from the client. Russell, thank you for taking the charge on this. But it was one of these funny things where it's like, yeah, technically we hadn't done anything. You know, we did everything we were supposed to, but
that's communication, my friend.
It is.
All right. And thank you for the reference for those books for Marty too. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank
No,
you.
those have been, and clients seem to like them. I don't know how fresh they're updating. Those look like they have a Windows 10 one from last year. So it should work.
All right, guys, I got to run to another meeting.
All right.
else.
Sounds
Thank you
good.
for participating.
Sonia, I like your afternoon light coming through. It's very cool right now.
It is. I totally face the south right now, so it helps brighten up like the end of my day, and it's so
That's
nice.
nice.
For a while, at this point,
Northwest.
it would be pitch dark.
Yeah, I'm northwest, and it's fading away. So, all
Oh,
right,
good.
thanks, folks. Good to see
Thank
you
you.
always. Yep, and hopefully we get to see each other in Chicago soon. So, or wherever.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. All right.
Thank
Michael,
you.
I'm going to email you some follow-up questions if you don't mind.
Please do.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.